This was a war of colonial dominance.
Some people, myself included, tend to look at this war as Act One of the American Revolution.
The French and Indian War, an 18th century conflict between England and France for control of North America.
The French and Indian War started as a consequence of both the English colonies and the French colony of Canada expanding into the Ohio Valley to take advantage of trade with the Indians, the fur trade.
The fighting began in 1754, when a young George Washington led an attack against a French scouting party in the Ohio Valley. The conflict quickly escalated, expanding into a global war in 1756 called the 7 Years' War. By 1760, the French and Indian War had functionally ended with the British capture of Quebec and Montreal. The 1763 Treaty of Paris brought an end to the 7 Years' War and solidified the expulsion of France from Canada. The outcome of the French and Indian War did more than just remove France from North America. Some of the war's legacies endure to this day.
As Americans especially, we tend to orient everything around the American Revolution as the most fundamentally important conflict in the history of the continent, made us who we are as Americans. We really have that narrative so centrally in our minds. And when we think about the 7 Years' War, or in the American parlance, the French and Indian War, we maybe learn about it in high school, but we don't think about it a lot. It's not seen as important as these other conflicts. But really, you can make a strong argument the 7 Years' War was the most important conflict in the history of North America. First off, it fundamentally changed the imperial makeup of North America.
This imperial change came at a cost for the British, both cultural and financial.
Here in North America, when the war was won and the French presence in Canada was gone, the American colonists didn't have an enemy to fight anymore.
The lack of a French enemy made the Americans turn their attention to the injustices of British rule.
This war was extremely expensive. The British won essentially by outspending the French and overwhelming them with troops and weapons. That made them incur enormous debts, and those debts needed to be paid. And what did the British do? The British Crown, King George, they levied taxes on the colonists to pay for their victory in the war. Things like the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, the Intolerable Acts that infuriated the colonists. They also tried to limit expansion into the interior. And those two things were intolerable to colonists, and it led directly to the American Revolution. There is no American Revolution without the 7 Years' War.
The French and Indian War not only contributed to the reasons for the American War for Independence, but also contributed to the experience of the Continental troops.
A lot of the Americans who are leaders in the American Revolution, they get their military training during that war. Serving as provincial soldiers, serving with British soldiers, learning how to run an army, how to fight in the field, how to live in the field, all those sorts of things.
The French and Indian War also changed military tactics of the time.
European warfare tended to take place in open areas. You had much of the continent was farmed, so armies were organized to basically fight in large blocks of men, firing muskets, using bayonets in sort of close order.
The heavily forested areas of North America saw a different style of warfare, which Native Americans excelled at.
Native people, warfare is completely different. Small groups of warriors who are highly mobile, highly flexible, highly adaptable, concealing themselves, attacking quickly, ambushing quickly, and scattering. Braddock's defeat earlier in the 7 Years' War was a huge example of this. Finding a position of concealment, surrounding your enemy, and firing down on them.
Braddock's defeat was a devastating early loss in the war. The French Allied Indians killed close to 1,000 British troops in just a few hours.
Native people really revolutionized using rifles and firing from concealed positions, finding high ground, sharpshooting. That was an indigenous innovation in warfare. It was a huge, huge deal.
As the war waged on, Europeans continued imposing siege tactics, while many colonials adopted the forest fighting style of their Indian allies.
The natives of North America, be they of European origin or in Native American origin, pretty much fought in the same way in the woods. And the French and the British regular troops had to learn it from both of them. And it was a different kind of warfare.
Most famously, Robert Rogers, a New Englander, formed Rogers Rangers. This unit adopted native tactics for reconnaissance and other special operations. Rogers is largely considered the godfather of special forces, and his rules of ranging are still printed in the U.S. Army Ranger Handbook. Perhaps the best lesson to take away from this war is how even small actions can lead to large and lasting outcomes.
We very often nowadays feel that one person can't affect things because there's just so much. Things are so big and so deep and so tall that one person can't affect the outcome of something. The French and Indian War is an example of how it can. I mean, George Washington, because of his actions in that valley in Pennsylvania, led to a whole lot of other things that happened afterwards that, again, may have turned out entirely different had it started differently.
Thanks for watching my video. If you want to see more things like this in the future, hit the subscribe button, or head over to my website where you could sign up for my newsletter.